Have you ever given someone an inch only for them to take a mile? Trusted someone with something important to you only to have them completely disrespect your boundaries? That's exactly what happened to me last summer when my 25-year-old daughter, Madison, decided that my carefully maintained lakeside home was the perfect venue for her and her friends to throw what she called a small gathering. What followed was a cascade of disrespect, property damage, and entitlement that forced me to make one of the hardest decisions of my life: accessing her trust fund to treat myself to the luxury cruise I'd always dreamed of. You might be thinking, I'm the villain in this story, but wait until you hear the full picture before making your judgment. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I've always prided myself on being a reasonable parent. After my husband Derek passed away 8 years ago, I was left to raise Madison alone through her late teens and early 20s. It wasn't easy, but Derek had been smart with our finances. He'd established a solid trust fund for Madison that would give her a comfortable start in adult life once she turned 30. And he'd left me our beautiful 3-bedroom house on Lake Tahoe, which I'd meticulously maintained and decorated over the years. Madison and I had always been close. At least I thought so. After graduating college 3 years ago, she moved to San Francisco to work at a marketing firm. She would visit on holidays and occasionally for long weekends, and I always looked forward to our time together. That's why when she called me last June asking if she could use the house for a small gathering with her close friends to celebrate her promotion, I didn't hesitate to say yes. "It'll just be me and maybe 10 friends, Mom," she promised over the phone. "We'll keep everything super low-key, I swear. You know I respect your space." I had a conference in Seattle that weekend anyway, a 3-day seminar on retirement planning that I'd been looking forward to for months. The timing seemed perfect. "Of course, honey," I told her. "Just make sure everything's cleaned up before I get back on Sunday evening. And please, no parties that'll have the neighbors calling the police." Madison laughed. "Mom, I'm 25, not 18. This isn't going to be some wild college rager. Just a few friends, some wine, and celebrating my promotion. I should have known better. I should have remembered the times in high school when just a few friends turned into 30 teenagers in my living room. But Madison was an adult now, and I wanted to trust her. Besides, my neighbor Eleanor had promised to keep an eye on things and call me if anything got out of hand. The weekend of my conference arrived, and I left early Friday morning after making sure the house was spotless. I'd spent the entire week preparing, cleaning the hardwood floors, dusting the antique furniture that had been in Derek's family for generations, and making sure the garden was perfect. I'd even bought fresh flowers for the dining room table, peonies, Madison's favorite. The conference was fascinating, and I was fully engaged in the sessions about maximizing retirement accounts and investment strategies. That Friday evening, I called Madison to check in. "Everything is going well, honey?" I asked. "Perfect, Mom." She sounded excited but not suspicious. "Melissa and Kayla just arrived, and we're about to have dinner on the deck. The sunset over the lake is gorgeous tonight." "That sounds lovely," I said, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction that my daughter was enjoying the home I'd worked so hard to maintain. "Remember, the outdoor cushions need to come in if it looks like rain." "Yes, Mom, I know," Madison said with that slightly exasperated tone adult children get when they think their parents are being overprotective. "Everything is under control." Saturday went by without incident. I texted Madison a couple of times, and she responded promptly with assurances that all was well. By Sunday morning, I was packing my bag and feeling proud of myself for trusting my daughter with the responsibility of the house. I'd even bought her a small gift in Seattle, a beautiful leather journal with her initials embossed on the cover. Then Eleanor called. "Linda," she said, her voice tight with barely contained fury. "I thought you should know what's been happening at your house this weekend." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Madison just has a few friends over." Eleanor snorted. A few friends? Linda, there must have been at least 50 people there last night. Cars lined the street, music blasting until 3 in the morning. I would have called earlier, but I didn't want to disturb your conference. I felt sick. Are they still there? Most of them left about an hour ago, Eleanor said. But the state of your yard? She trailed off. I'm sorry, Linda, but I thought you should know before you got home. I thanked her and immediately tried calling Madison. No answer. I tried 3 more times during my drive to the airport, and each time it went straight to voicemail. By the time I boarded my flight back to Reno, my worry had transformed into anger. I sent her a terse text. Call me immediately. Still nothing. The 3-hour flight felt like an eternity. All I could think about was what state my beautiful home would be in when I returned. The antique furniture, the Persian rugs, the crystal vases that had been wedding gifts, the garden I'd spent countless hours perfecting. When the plane finally landed, I had one text from Madison. Sorry about the mess, Mom. Had a few more people than expected. Heading back to SF now for work tomorrow. We'll call you later. Love you. A few more people than expected? My blood boiled as I rented a car and drove the hour from Reno to Lake Tahoe. As I turned onto our street, my worst fears were confirmed. The normally pristine front yard was littered with red plastic cups, empty bottles, and what appeared to be the remnants of several pizza boxes. The mailbox was tilted at an odd angle, as if someone had backed into it. With shaking hands, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, a nauseating mix of spilled alcohol, cigarette smoke, and something else I couldn't identify. Then I saw the damage. My beautiful hardwood floors were sticky with spilled drinks and tracked-in mud. Someone had apparently dropped a glass of red wine on the cream-colored sofa Derek and I had bought for our 10th anniversary. The antique coffee table had burn marks from cigarettes, despite the fact that I had a strict no-smoking policy indoors. And most heartbreaking of all, the framed wedding photo that had stood on the mantelpiece, the last professional photo taken of Derek before his diagnosis, was missing from its place. I moved through the house in a daze, cataloging each new horror. In the kitchen, dirty dishes were piled high in the sink, and something that looked suspiciously like vomit was dried on the floor beside the refrigerator. The deck was littered with more cups and bottles, and one of the teak lounge chairs I'd saved for months to buy had a broken leg. But the worst was yet to come. When I made it to the master bedroom, my sanctuary, which should have been off-limits to Madison and her friends, I found the door unlocked. Inside, my bedding was rumpled and stained. The bathroom door was open, revealing wet towels thrown haphazardly on the floor. And my jewelry box, which I always kept on my dresser, was open. With trembling fingers, I checked the contents. The pearl necklace Derek had given me on our first anniversary was gone. So were the diamond earrings that had belonged to my mother. A cold fury settled over me as I methodically checked the rest of the house. In the guest bathroom, someone had apparently tried to flush a whole roll of toilet paper, causing an overflow that had damaged the floor tiles. In the garden, empty. Bottles had been tossed into my carefully tended flower beds, crushing several prized roses. And most bizarrely, someone had moved the patio furniture into the lake, where it now sat partially submerged in the clear water. It was only when I went to the basement to check the breaker box, several lights weren't working, that I discovered the final insult. The locked cabinet where I kept my fine wines, including 3 bottles from the year Derek and I were married that we had been saving for Madison's wedding, had been broken into. Every single bottle was gone. It took me nearly an hour to work up the courage to call Madison. By then, my shock had hardened into a cold, implacable anger I'd never felt toward my daughter before. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. "Hey, Mom." "Madison Elizabeth Harrington," I said, my voice deadly calm. "What have you done to my house?" There was a long pause. "I know it's bad," she finally said. "I'm really sorry. Things got out of hand." Got out of hand? I echoed. Madison, my house has been destroyed. There is damage that will cost thousands to repair. My mother's earrings and my pearl necklace are missing. The wine cabinet has been broken into. What happened? Another pause. I invited a few more people than I planned, she admitted. And then they invited others. I tried to keep everyone out. Of your room, Mom, I swear. But it was crazy by midnight, and I couldn't control everyone. And you left, I said flatly. You let this happen to my home, and then you just left before I got back. I had to get back for work, she said defensively, and I was going to pay for a cleaning service to come today. I didn't realize how bad it was until this morning, and then I was running late for my flight. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing. Madison, this is beyond a cleaning service. This is thousands of dollars in damage. Irreplaceable items are missing. And you didn't even have the decency to stay and face me. I'm sorry, she said, her voice rising. What do you want me to do? I can't change what happened. I want you to come back here and see what you've done, I said firmly. I want you to help me clean up this mess and file a police report for the stolen items. And I want you to pay for the damages. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. There was a long silence. I can't come back right now, Mom. I have a huge presentation tomorrow. My whole promotion depends on it. I can come next weekend. Next weekend, I repeated, incredulous. You think this can wait until next weekend? I can't even use my own bathroom right now because the floor is water damaged. My bedroom smells like someone else's cologne. I said I'm sorry. Madison's voice had that petulant tone I remembered from her teenage years. What else do you want from me? I'll pay for everything, okay? Just call a service and send me the bill. Something snapped inside me. After all I'd done for Madison, after all the sacrifices, the late nights helping with homework, the college tuition payments that had drained my savings, the unwavering support I'd given her even when she'd made choices I disagreed with. This was how she repaid me, with disrespect, carelessness, and now avoidance of responsibility. Fine, I said coldly. I'll take care of it. But this conversation isn't over, Madison. I hung up before she could respond and sat down heavily on the one kitchen chair that hadn't been broken or stained. As I surveyed the wreckage of my beautiful home, a plan began to form in my mind. Derek had set up Madison's trust fund with both of us as trustees until she turned 30. The intention had been that I would help guide her financial decisions until she was mature enough to handle the money wisely. In the 8 years since his death, I had never touched a penny of that money, considering it Madison's inheritance and future security. But now, looking at the destruction around me, I made a decision. Madison clearly wasn't mature enough to handle the responsibility of a house for one weekend. How could she possibly be responsible enough to manage a substantial trust fund? And more importantly, didn't I deserve some compensation for this betrayal? I picked up my phone again, but this time I wasn't calling Madison. I was calling Richard Thornton, our family's financial advisor who managed the trust. Linda, he greeted me warmly. How are you? It's been a while since our last check-in. I've been better, Richard, I said honestly. I'm calling about Madison's trust. I need to make a withdrawal. There was a pause. I see, he said carefully. May I ask what this is regarding? As you know, the terms of the trust are quite specific, about qualified expenses. Home repairs, I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. And a temporary relocation while those repairs are being completed. We spent the next 30 minutes discussing the details. As co-trustee, I had the legal right to access the funds for Madison's benefit or for expenses related to her actions. Richard seemed hesitant but didn't outright refuse. He knew Derek would have wanted me to have this flexibility in managing our daughter's future. By the end of the call, I had authorization to withdraw $25,000 from the trust, enough to cover the repairs to my home and something extra. Something I'd been dreaming about for years but had always put off because I was too busy taking care of everyone else: a luxury cruise through the Mediterranean. Derek and I had always planned to take that cruise for our 30th anniversary. He'd been gone for 8 years now, and I'd spent every one of those years putting Madison first. Maybe it was time I finally did something for myself. And maybe it was time Madison learned that actions have consequences. The days following my discovery were a blur of phone calls and appointments. I hired a professional cleaning service that specialized in disaster restoration. They arrived Monday morning, 6 workers in matching uniforms with industrial equipment, looking almost comically serious as they surveyed the chaos. "Ma'am, this is extensive," the team leader said diplomatically as he walked through the house, taking notes on his tablet. "We're looking at a minimum of 3 days for the basic cleanup, and that doesn't include any specialized repairs like the hardwood floors or the water damage in the bathroom." I nodded numbly. "Whatever it takes, just make it livable again." While the cleanup crew worked, I documented everything for the insurance claim and police report. The responding officer, a kind-faced woman named Officer Ramirez, walked through the house with me, taking photographs and notes. "You said your daughter hosted the party?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I admitted, feeling a strange mix of anger and shame. "She's 25. She asked to have a few friends over while I was out of town." Officer Ramirez nodded, her expression neutral. "And you want to file reports for the stolen jewelry and wine?" I hesitated, conflicted about involving the police in what was ultimately my daughter's mess. But these weren't just any possessions. The pearl necklace was one of the few meaningful gifts I had left from Derek, and my mother's earrings were irreplaceable family heirlooms. "Yes," I said firmly, "I need to report them stolen." Later that afternoon, I checked into a nearby hotel overlooking the lake. The room was small but clean, with a balcony where I could sit and try to process the weekend's events. Madison had texted twice more but hadn't called. Her messages were brief and defensive. "Mom, I said I'm sorry. What else can I say?" And later, "The presentation went well. I really can't get away until Friday at the earliest." I didn't respond. For the first time in our relationship, I didn't have the energy to smooth things over or be the understanding mother. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching Mediterranean cruises. There was a 14-day voyage departing from Barcelona in 3 weeks, stopping at ports in France, Italy, Greece, and Turkey before returning to Spain. It featured luxurious staterooms with private balconies, fine dining, evening entertainment, and shore excursions to historic sites I'd always wanted to visit. The Colosseum in Rome, the Acropolis in Athens, the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. The deluxe package included business-class airfare, pre-cruise accommodations in Barcelona, and a beverage package covering fine wines and premium spirits. The price made me wince: $2,200 for a solo traveler in a deluxe veranda suite. Added to the initial estimates for home repairs, $7,800, it came close to the full $25,000 I'd withdrawn from Madison's trust. A tiny voice in my head whispered that this was excessive, punitive, even vindictive. But another voice, stronger, more insistent, reminded me of all I'd sacrificed over the years. I'd put my own dreams on hold to raise Madison after Derek died. I'd dipped into my retirement savings to help with her college expenses when tuition increased unexpectedly in her junior year. I'd spent countless weekends driving to San Francisco to help her move between apartments or to deliver home-cooked meals when she was too busy with work to take care of herself. And how had she repaid me? By treating my home, our home, the place where we'd been a family, with complete disregard. Before I could second-guess myself, I entered my credit card information and booked the cruise. The confirmation email arrived moments later, and with it came a wave of emotion, guilt, excitement, apprehension, and a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. The hotel phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was Richard Thornton. "Linda, I've processed the withdrawal as requested," he said, his tone carefully professional. "I wanted to confirm that the funds have been transferred to your account." "Thank you, Richard," I replied. "I appreciate your help with this." There was a pause. "Linda, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but I've known your family for many years now. Is everything all right between you and Madison?" I sighed, considering how much to share. Richard had been Derek's friend before becoming our financial advisor. He'd watched Madison grow up and had always taken a personal interest in our family's well-being. "Madison hosted a party at my house while I was away," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "Things got out of hand. There's significant damage to the property, and some valuable items were stolen." "I see," Richard said, his voice reflecting concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. And the withdrawal is to cover these damages?" "Partly," I admitted. "I've also booked a cruise, something Derek and I always planned to do together." Another pause. "I understand," he said finally. "Derek would want you to take care of yourself, Linda. You've been through a lot." After hanging up, I sat on the balcony watching the sunset over Lake Tahoe. The golden light reflected off the water, creating a breathtaking display that normally would have brought me peace. Tonight, however, I felt only a hollow ache in my chest. What would Derek think of my decision? Would he understand my need for this symbolic break, this assertion of my own worth? Or would he see it as pettiness, a disproportionate response to Madison's carelessness? The cleaning crew worked diligently over the next 3 days. By Thursday evening, the house was at least functional. The floors had been cleaned and sanitized, the bathroom plumbing repaired, the furniture either cleaned or removed for more. Extensive restoration. The garden would take longer to recover, and I'd need to order replacements for several pieces of furniture, but at least I could move back home. I was unpacking my small suitcase in the bedroom when my phone rang. Madison's face appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Mom?" Her voice sounded small, uncertain. "I'm at the airport. My flight gets in at 7. Can you pick me up?" I hadn't expected this. "You're coming here? Tonight?" "You said you wanted me to see the damage and help clean up," she reminded me. "So I'm coming. I took tomorrow off too." I felt a complex mix of emotions, appreciation for her finally taking some responsibility, lingering anger over the situation, and anxiety about the conversation we needed to have. "I'll be there," I said simply. The drive to Reno was tense, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say. When Madison emerged from the terminal, she looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the confident young professional I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Her normally immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, minimal makeup, wearing jeans and a Stanford sweatshirt rather than her usual stylish outfits. She hesitated when she saw me, then hurried over and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Despite everything, I felt my resolve weaken. This was my daughter, my only child. The anger I'd been nursing suddenly felt heavy and exhausting. "Let's go home," I said quietly. "We have a lot to talk about." The drive back was mostly silent, with Madison staring out the window at the darkening landscape. As we approached the house, I could feel her tense beside me. "It's better now," I told her. The cleaning service did a good job with what they could fix immediately. Madison nodded but didn't speak. When we pulled into the driveway, she sat motionless for a long moment, staring at the house as if gathering courage. Inside, I led her through each room, pointing out the damage that remained visible: the stained sofa, the burned coffee table, the missing items. Madison followed silently, her face growing paler with each new revelation. When we reached my bedroom and I showed her the empty spots in my jewelry box where the pearl necklace and diamond earrings had been, she finally broke down. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she sobbed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "It was supposed to be just Melissa, Kayla, and a few others from work. But then Melissa invited some guys she knows, and they brought more people. And before I knew it, the house was full of people I didn't even know." "Why didn't you call the police?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Why didn't you shut it down?" Madison wiped her eyes. "I tried. I really did. But by midnight it was totally out of control. Someone had brought a keg. People were jumping in the lake. I was outnumbered, Mom." "So you just gave up? Let them trash my home?" "I was scared," she admitted in a small voice. "Some of these guys were really drunk, and when I tried to get them to leave, they just laughed at me. I locked myself in the guest room for a while. By morning, most people had left, and I panicked. The house was a disaster, and I had that presentation Monday morning. I convinced myself I could fix it later." I sat down beside her, maintaining some distance. "Madison, I raised you to take responsibility for your actions. Even if you didn't cause all the damage directly, you were responsible for the people you invited into my home." "I know," she whispered. "I messed up horribly. I'll pay for everything, Mom. Every single penny. That's already been taken care of," I said carefully. Madison looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" This was the moment I'd been preparing for and dreading. "I made a withdrawal from your trust fund to cover the damages and some additional expenses." Her confusion deepened. "You can do that?" "Your father and I are both trustees until you turn 30, I reminded her. "The terms allow withdrawals for certain purposes, including remediation of damages caused by the beneficiary." Madison was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "How much?" she finally asked. $25,000. Her eyes widened. $25,000? But there's no way the damages cost that much. The whole house isn't even— She stopped abruptly, realization dawning on her face. "What additional expenses, Mom?" I met her gaze steadily. "I've booked a Mediterranean cruise, the one your father and I always planned to take for our 30th anniversary." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison stared at me, incredulous. "You're using my trust fund to go on a cruise?" she finally sputtered. "How is that fair?" "Fair?" I repeated, feeling the anger I'd been suppressing rise to the surface again. "Was it fair when you destroyed my home and then left without cleaning up? Was it fair when your party guests stole precious mementos of your father and grandmother? Was it fair when you prioritized your presentation over helping me deal with this disaster?" Madison flinched but rallied quickly. "That doesn't give you the right to take my money for a vacation." "It's not your money yet," I reminded her. "It's a trust that your father and I established for your future, with conditions. One of those conditions is that you demonstrate responsible behavior. So this is what? A punishment?" "This is a consequence," I corrected her. "For perhaps the first time in your adult life, you're experiencing the real-world consequences of your actions. And yes, part of that consequence is that I'm finally going to take the vacation your father and I dreamed about before he got sick. Before we spent our savings on his medical expenses. Before I put my entire life on hold to make sure you had everything you needed." Madison was silent, her expression a mix of anger, shame, and something else. Maybe the first glimmering of understanding. "When do you leave?" she asked eventually, her voice subdued. 3 weeks from Saturday. I'll be gone for 16 days, including travel time." She nodded slowly, then stood up. "I should get some sleep. It's been a long day." I watched her walk toward the door, feeling an uncomfortable mix of satisfaction at having stood my ground and guilt over the hurt I could see in her posture. "Madison," I called after her, "there's still time to make this right. The cleaning. Service will be back tomorrow to give estimates on the remaining repairs, and I filed a police report about the stolen items. If you can help track those down—" She paused in the doorway. "I'll make some calls in the morning. Some of Melissa's friends might know something." After she left, I sat alone in my bedroom, the emotional weight of the confrontation settling over me. Had I gone too far? The cruise would cost nearly 3 times what the repairs would. Was I genuinely teaching Madison a valuable lesson about consequences, or was I simply indulging in retribution? I glanced at the photo on my nightstand, Derek holding a 5-year-old Madison on his shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing in the sunlight. What would he think of the way I'd handled this situation? I had 3 weeks before the cruise to figure that out. 3 weeks to either heal the rift I'd created with my daughter or watch it widen into something permanent. And somewhere in the middle of that uncertainty, I needed to decide whether I truly deserved this extravagant gift I'd given myself at Madison's expense. Sleep was elusive that night, my mind alternating between justified indignation and nagging doubt. By dawn, I'd reached only one conclusion. The Mediterranean waters might wash away my recent stress, but they couldn't cleanse my conscience if the price of my voyage was my relationship with my only child. The morning after our confrontation, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing, a small but meaningful gesture from Madison. When I entered the kitchen, I found her already dressed and speaking intently on the phone, her free hand making emphatic gestures. "I don't care if you don't remember, Tyler. Someone at that party took my mother's jewelry and I need you to ask around." Her voice was firm, authoritative, reminiscent of how Derek used to handle difficult situations. "No, I'm not accusing you, but you brought people I didn't know, and now family heirlooms are missing." She glanced up, noticed me, and straightened. "Just help me out here, okay? Call me if you hear anything." She ended the call and turned to face me fully. "Good morning. I made coffee." "Thank you," I said, accepting the mug she offered. An awkward silence stretched between us. "The cleaning crew called," Madison finally said. "They'll be here at 9 to assess the remaining damage." I nodded, still uncertain how to navigate this new tension between us. "Did you sleep okay in the guest room?" "Well enough," she replied with a small shrug. "I've been making calls since 6. I've talked to everyone I can remember who was at the party. No one admits to taking anything, but a few people mentioned seeing a guy named Craig going through rooms upstairs. I'm trying to track him down now. He was apparently someone's +1. I felt a small surge of appreciation for her efforts. "Thank you for doing that." Madison nodded, her eyes dropping to her coffee mug. "It's the least I can do." She hesitated, then continued. "About the trust fund withdrawal. I was thinking about it all night. I reacted badly. I was shocked, but I shouldn't have lashed out like that. This wasn't what I'd expected. I'd prepared myself for continued anger, for accusations and resentment. I was angry too, I acknowledged. Maybe I didn't handle it in the best way either." Madison looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "The damages are my responsibility. I accept that. But the cruise—" She paused. "That feels different. That feels like you're trying to punish me." I set my mug down, choosing my words carefully. "It's not about punishment, Madison. It's about finally doing something for myself after years of putting everyone else first. But why use my trust fund? You could have used your own money." It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past few days. "I could have," I admitted. "But it would have strained my finances considerably, especially with the unexpected home repairs. The trust has liquidity right now." Madison's expression showed she wasn't entirely satisfied with this explanation, but it's still taking something that was meant for my future. "Your father and I created that trust to help you become a responsible adult," I pointed out, "not to fund property destruction and theft." Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't back down. "I understand that I messed up with the party. I'm trying to make it right. But $25,000 is a lot more than the actual damages. The cruise alone must cost $18,000, I supplied. Madison's eyes widened. $18,000? Mom, that's excessive. To you, maybe, I said, feeling defensive. But your father and I scrimped and saved for years to afford a trip like this. Then he got sick, and every penny went to medical bills and making sure you could stay in your private school so your education wouldn't be disrupted during his illness. After he died, I focused on keeping you on track for college. There was never time or money for what I wanted. Madison fell silent, her expression softening. Finally, she asked, "Did Dad really want to take this cruise?" The question caught me, off guard. Yes. We talked about it for years. Greece, Italy, Turkey, all the ancient sites we'd read about but never seen. We were going to go for our 30th anniversary, which would have been last year, I said quietly. Madison nodded, slowly, processing this information. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the cleaning crew. The next several hours were consumed with practical matters, getting estimates for repairs, discussing replacement options for damaged furniture, scheduling, specialists for the hardwood floor restoration. Madison participated fully, taking notes and asking relevant questions. She insisted on handling the scheduling herself, coordinating with my calendar to ensure minimal disruption. By mid-afternoon, we had a comprehensive plan in place for restoring the house to its former state. Madison had even found a furniture restoration specialist who might be able to repair the antique coffee table rather than replacing it. As the last contractor left, Madison turned to me. "I need to show you something," she said, gesturing toward her laptop on the dining table. "I've been working on a spreadsheet." She opened a detailed document tracking all the estimated expenses for repairs, replacements, and cleaning services. The total came to just under $8,300. "I've transferred this amount from my personal savings to your account," she said, showing me the completed bank transaction on her phone. "It should be available by tomorrow morning." I stared at her, surprised by this concrete step toward making amends. "Madison, Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I know I can't get back the sentimental items that were taken. I'm still making calls, and I've filed additional information with Officer Ramirez about this Craig person. But I want you to know I'm taking full responsibility for the tangible damages." I felt a complicated mix of emotions: pride in her maturity, regret for the harsh way I'd handled the situation, and lingering hurt over the invasion of my home and the loss of irreplaceable mementos. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot to me." Madison nodded, then continued with obvious difficulty. "About the cruise. I've been thinking. Dad would have wanted you to go. You deserve it after everything you've done for me, especially these past 8 years. I felt a lump forming in my throat. But I wish you had just asked me," she said softly. "If you'd told me how important this trip was to you and Dad, I would have happily helped you pay for it from the trust or my own savings. Taking it without discussing it first, it made me feel like you don't trust me at all." Her words struck home. Had I been so caught up in my righteous anger that I'd bypassed a chance for us to handle this situation as two adults? Had I been punishing Madison not just for the party disaster, but for all the sacrifices I'd made over the years? Sacrifices she'd never asked for, but that I sometimes resented nonetheless. "You're right," I admitted, the words difficult but necessary. "I should have talked to you first. I was angry and hurt, and I acted impulsively." Madison's shoulders relaxed slightly at my acknowledgement. "So, where do we go from here? Are you still planning to take the cruise?" I hesitated. The cruise represented something important to me. A dream deferred, a promise to myself and to Derek's memory. But was it worth the potential damage to my relationship with Madison? "I'd like to," I said carefully. "It means a great deal to me, but I can modify the arrangements, choose a less expensive option. Madison shook her head. No, Mom. If you're going to do this, do it right. The way you and Dad planned. She took a deep breath. I just have one request. What's that? Let me come with you. The request caught me completely off guard. You want to join me on the cruise? Madison nodded. I can take the time off. My boss owes me after the success of last week's presentation, and I think it would be good for us. A chance to reconnect away from all this. She gestured around the house with its lingering evidence of damage. My first instinct was to refuse. The cruise was supposed to be my independence declaration, my time for self-care after years of putting others first. Having Madison along would change the dynamic entirely. But looking at her earnest expression, I realized this might be an opportunity for healing that was more valuable than 2 weeks of solitude. And perhaps sharing this experience that had meant so much to Derek and me would help Madison understand parts of our life together that predated her. You'd really want to spend 2 weeks on a ship with your mother? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Madison smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since she'd arrived. I can think of worse travel companions. Besides, I've never been to Europe. You could show me all the places you and Dad plan to visit. The idea was taking root now, evolving from something that felt like retribution into something that could be regenerative for both of us. I'd need to call the cruise line, I said, thinking aloud. See if we can modify the booking to accommodate 2 people. There might be an additional charge. I'll cover it, Madison said quickly. Consider it part of my apology package. That startled a laugh out of me, a welcome release of tension. Your apology package? Too corporate? She asked with a small grin. Sorry, occupational hazard. That evening, we cooked dinner together, a simple pasta dish that had been a family favorite when Madison was growing up. As we moved around the kitchen, the awkwardness between us gradually dissipated, replaced by a tentative new understanding. Over dinner, Madison surprised me again. I talked to Richard this afternoon, she said casually. I set down my fork. Richard Thornton. Why? I wanted to understand more about how trust works, she explained. About my responsibilities and yours as co-trustees. I wasn't sure how to feel about this. Had she been checking up on me, making sure I hadn't overstepped my legal bounds? And what did he tell you? He explained the terms Dad set up. How the money is supposed to be used primarily for my benefit, but can be accessed in certain circumstances for family needs. She took a sip of wine before continuing. He also told me something I didn't know, that a portion of the trust was actually specifically designated for you. This was news to me. What do you mean? Apparently, Dad set aside about 15% of the total amount for your retirement or personal needs. Richard assumed you knew this, but it sounds like it was never explicitly discussed after Dad passed away. I felt a strange mixture of confusion and warmth at this revelation. It was so like Derek to think ahead, to build in protections I wouldn't have asked for myself. I had no idea, I admitted. All these years I've been treating the entire trust as your future inheritance. Madison reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Dad wanted to make sure you were taken care of too. Richard showed me the documentation. The cruise could have come from your portion of the trust without any issue. The irony wasn't lost on me. So I had every right to use the money for the cruise after all, just not for the reasons I thought. Exactly, Madison said. Richard is drafting paperwork to officially redesignate the withdrawal as coming from your portion rather than the main trust. That way, everything stays clean from an accounting perspective. I was touched by her thoughtfulness and slightly ashamed of my earlier assumptions about her motives. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, she said simply. It feels like the right thing to do. We fell silent for a moment, the revelation settling between us and shifting the emotional landscape yet again. So, Madison finally said, should I call my boss tonight about the time off, or wait until we know for sure the cruise line can accommodate both of us? Just like that, we were moving forward. The crisis transformed into an unexpected opportunity for growth. The next morning, I called the cruise line while Madison continued her efforts to track down the missing jewelry. The customer service representative was surprisingly accommodating, explaining that they could easily modify my deluxe veranda suite to a slightly larger family suite for an additional $3,200, which would include Madison's fare and amenities. As promised, Madison covered the additional cost without hesitation. She also insisted on handling the arrangements for a house sitter during our absence and scheduled the most disruptive repair work to coincide with our trip. Over the next 2 weeks, we settled into a new rhythm. Madison extended her stay through the weekend, helping with the initial cleanup and repairs before returning to San Francisco with promises to call regularly about cruise preparations. One Tuesday evening, 2 days before she was scheduled to return for our departure, my phone rang with Madison's ringtone. "Mom!" Her voice was breathless with excitement. "You're not going to believe this! They found your jewelry!" My heart leapt. "What? How?" Officer Ramirez called me. They tracked down that Craig guy I mentioned. Turns out he has a record of petty theft. When they brought him in for questioning, he admitted taking some jewelry from a house party at the lake. He'd already pawned the pearl necklace, but he still had Grandma's earrings hidden in his apartment. I felt tears spring to my eyes. The pearl necklace was irreplaceable, but at least part of what was lost had been recovered. "That's wonderful news," I managed to say. "When can we get the earrings back?" "They're holding them as evidence for now, but Officer Ramirez thinks they'll be released in a few weeks. They're still trying to track down the pawn shop that bought the necklace." After we hung up, I sat on the deck watching the sunset over the lake, reflecting on the tumultuous past few weeks. What had begun as a catastrophe had evolved into something unexpected, a chance to rebuild my relationship with Madison on more mature ground, a recalibration of boundaries and expectations on both sides. The cruise that I'd initially booked as an act of defiance now represented something different, an opportunity to honor Derek's memory together with our daughter, to create new shared experiences while acknowledging our individual needs and responsibilities. As I packed my suitcase for Barcelona, carefully selecting clothes for Mediterranean evenings and comfortable shoes for exploring ancient ruins, I found myself looking forward not just to the destinations, but to the journey itself. 14 days at sea with Madison, navigating not just the Mediterranean but the complex waters of our evolving relationship. The trust fund withdrawal that had started as a consequence had transformed into an investment in healing, in growth, in the future of our family, small as it now was. Derek would have approved, I thought. He had always believed in second chances, in learning from mistakes, in the possibility of redemption. Tomorrow, Madison would arrive for our final preparations before departure. The contractors would finish the last of the immediate repairs while we were gone. And when we returned, both the house and our relationship would be transformed. Not back to what they had been before, but into something new, something stronger, something built on a foundation of hard lessons and genuine forgiveness. The Barcelona air felt different, warmer, saltier, infused with the scent of unfamiliar flowers and distant spices. Standing on the hotel balcony the night before our cruise departed, I watched the city lights twinkle below us, still adjusting to the time change and the surreal feeling of actually being here after decades of dreaming. "Wine?" Madison appeared, beside me, holding 2 glasses of local Spanish red. I accepted the glass with a smile. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Incredible," she agreed, leaning against the railing. "Dad would have loved this view." The mention of Derek no longer brought the sharp pain it once had. Instead, I felt a gentle warmth, a sense of his presence with us on this journey. He would have been up at dawn tomorrow, detailed itinerary in hand, Making sure we didn't miss a minute of exploration, I said, smiling at the memory. Madison laughed. I remember how he used to plan our family vacations, color-coded schedules, backup plans for rain days, restaurant reservations made months in advance. And then he'd throw the whole schedule out the window the minute something interesting caught his eye, I added, the memory vivid and sweet. I checked my email earlier, Madison said, breaking the silence. The contractors sent pictures. The hardwood floor restoration in the living room is finished. It looks amazing. I nodded, grateful for the update but also appreciating that we were creating space between ourselves and the events that had brought us here. That's good to hear. Madison hesitated, then added, Officer Ramirez also sent an update. They located the pawn shop, but the necklace had already been sold. I took a deep breath, accepting the loss. It's just a thing, I said finally. What matters is that we're here. Madison clinked her glass against mine. To new beginnings. And to your father, I added softly, who somehow still manages to take care of us, even now. The next morning brought bright sunshine and mounting excitement as we gathered our luggage and headed to the cruise terminal. The Mediterranean Princess was even more impressive in person than it had appeared in the brochures. 14 decks, towering above the harbor, gleaming white against the azure sky. Check-in was seamless, with staff escorting us to our family suite on the 10th deck. The accommodations were luxurious, a spacious sitting area with a sofa and chairs, a bedroom with a king-sized bed for me, a separate sleeping area with convertible beds for Madison, and a private veranda offering sweeping views of the harbor. This is unbelievable, Madison breathed, running her hand over the marble countertop in the bathroom. I've never stayed anywhere this nice. I felt a surge of pleasure at her reaction. This is just the beginning. After the mandatory safety drill, we explored the ship while Barcelona receded into the distance. The Mediterranean Princess boasted 5 restaurants, 3 swimming pools, a theater, a casino, a spa, and countless lounges and quiet corners for reading or conversation. By dinner time, we developed a loose strategy for making the most of our time on board, balancing structured activities with relaxation. Our first dinner in the main dining room set the tone for the days to come. We were seated at a table with 3 other parties, a retired couple from Seattle celebrating their 40th anniversary, a mother and daughter from Chicago who shared our exact dynamic, though their trip was planned without the dramatic catalyst of ours, and a solo traveler from Austin who wrote travel guides for a living. Conversation flowed easily as we shared our backgrounds and reasons for taking the cruise. When it was our turn, Madison and I exchanged a quick glance, silently agreeing on a simplified version of our story. My mom and dad had always planned to take this cruise for their 30th wedding anniversary, Madison explained. My dad passed away 8 years ago, so Mom and I decided to take the trip together in his memory. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. It was the version that honored what this journey had become, rather than how it had begun. The first few days at sea established a pleasant rhythm. Mornings often found us taking a Pilates class together or enjoying coffee on our private veranda. Afternoons were spent reading by the pool or attending lectures about our upcoming ports of call. Evenings brought formal dinners, theatrical performances, or stargazing from the upper deck. Somewhere between Barcelona and our first port in Marseille, France, the last lingering tension between Madison and me dissolved completely. Perhaps it was the physical distance from the scene of our conflict, or maybe it was simply the shared novelty of experiencing new places together as equals rather than as parent and child. In Marseille, we wandered through the old port and climbed the steep hill to Notre Dame de la Garde, the magnificent basilica overlooking the city. Madison proved to be an enthusiastic travel companion, eagerly absorbing historical details and patiently waiting while I photographed architectural elements that reminded me of designs Derek and I had admired in books years ago. You know what's strange? Madison said as we shared bouillabaisse at a small restaurant recommended by our server at breakfast. I always thought of you and Dad as just Mom and Dad. Seeing you here, watching how excited you get about these buildings and the history, it's like I'm finally meeting the person you were before you had me. Her observation startled me. Is that good or bad? She smiled. Good. Really good. I like this version of you. She's adventurous. I felt myself blushing, unexpectedly touched. I was always this person. Life just got in the way for a while. Well, I'm glad she's back, Madison said, raising her glass in a small toast. The days unfolded like pages in a beautiful novel. In Florence, we spent hours in the Uffizi Gallery, marveling at Renaissance masterpieces. In Rome, we tossed coins into the Trevi Fountain and toured the Colosseum with a knowledgeable local guide. At each stop, we collected small mementos, a watercolor painting from a street artist in Florence, a ceramic tile from a family workshop in Pompeii, sea glass gathered from a quiet cove in Santorini. One evening, as our ship sailed from Mykonos toward Istanbul, Madison and I sat on our veranda sharing a bottle of Greek wine we'd purchased that afternoon. I've been thinking, Madison said, her expression thoughtful in the fading light, about what happened with the house and the trust fund. I tensed slightly, wondering if resentment had been simmering beneath the surface of our apparently reconciled relationship. What about it? I asked carefully. Madison swirled the wine in her glass before answering. It taught me something important. About consequences, yes, but also about perception. How so? I never saw myself as entitled or irresponsible, she explained. In my mind, I was the dedicated professional, the dutiful daughter who visited regularly and called to check in. I thought I was handling adulthood pretty well. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. But the party, and how I reacted afterward, she sighed. It showed me that I still had this childish expectation that someone else would clean up my messes, that you would always be there to make things right, the way you did when I was growing up. Her self-awareness surprised me. That's quite insightful, Madison. Don't sound so shocked, she said with a small laugh. I can occasionally demonstrate personal growth. I didn't mean, I know, Mom, she assured me. And I'm not finished. The other thing I realized is that I've never really acknowledged how much you gave up for me after Dad died. I felt my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. You put everything on hold, Madison continued softly. Your career, your social life, your dreams, including this cruise. And I just accepted it. Took it for granted as what mothers do. That is what mothers do, I said, but without the resignation that might have colored such a statement weeks ago. Maybe, Madison conceded, but children, even adult children, should recognize the sacrifice. I never did, not really. Not until now. I reached across the small table between us and squeezed her hand. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. We sat in companionable silence as the sky darkened and stars emerged above the inky sea. So what happens when we go home? Madison finally asked. Do we just go back to our separate lives? Monthly phone calls and holiday visits? The question had been on my mind as well. Something fundamental had shifted between us during this journey, and the thought of returning to our previous dynamic felt like a step backward. What would you want instead? I asked. Madison considered this. I'm not entirely sure, but something more than what we had. She hesitated. I've actually been thinking about relocating to Reno. My company has an office there and I could transfer. It would mean a smaller market, but also a chance at a better work-life balance. And I'd be much closer to the lake. The suggestion caught me by surprise. You'd move back to Nevada? What about your life in San Francisco? She shrugged. The city is exhausting, honestly. The cost of living is insane. My commute is over an hour each way, and most of my closest friends have already left for more affordable places. After seeing how peaceful the lake is again these past few weeks, I've been wondering if it might be time for a change. I tried to contain my excitement at the prospect. I'd love having you closer, but I don't want you to make a major life decision just for me. It wouldn't be just for you, Madison assured me. It would be for me too, a chance to reassess what's really important. In Istanbul, our final port before beginning the journey back to Barcelona, we visited the Blue Mosque and the Grand Bazaar, marveling at the confluence of cultures and the centuries of history embedded in every stone. That evening, our last, in port before 2 days at sea, we treated ourselves to a private tour of the Bosphorus at sunset, watching Europe and Asia glow golden in the fading light. Dad would have absolutely loved this, Madison said as our small boat navigated the strait between two continents. He always talked about standing in two worlds at once. He did love a good metaphor, I agreed, smiling at the memory. Speaking of metaphors, Madison said, I have something for you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I was going to save this for the last night of the cruise, but this moment feels right. Curious, I opened the pouch and tipped the contents into my palm. A pearl necklace gleamed in the golden light. Not my original one, but a similarly elegant strand with a modern platinum clasp. Madison, I breathed, running my fingers over the smooth pearls. It's beautiful. I know it can't replace the one Dad gave you, she said quickly, but I saw it in that little jewelry shop in Santorini, and the craftsman said the pearls came from the Mediterranean. It felt significant somehow. Tears welled in my eyes as I fastened the necklace around my neck. The weight of the pearls against my collarbone felt both familiar and new, a perfect representation of where we found ourselves, honoring the past while creating something different for the future. I love it, I told her sincerely. And I love that you chose to give it to me here, on the trip your father and I dreamed about for so long. Madison smiled, relief evident in her expression. So, it's not too presumptuous? I wasn't sure if it would feel like I was trying to replace something. Irreplaceable. Not at all, I assured her. It feels like continuity, not replacement. A new chapter, rather than an attempt to rewrite the old one. The final days of our cruise passed in a blur of activities. A cooking class where we learned to make authentic paella, a wine tasting featuring selections from each country we'd visited, a night of dancing under the stars at the farewell gala. We exchanged contact information with the friends we'd made, promising to share photos and perhaps even meet again on future travels. On our last morning, we stood on our veranda watching Barcelona grow larger on the horizon, both reluctant to see our journey end. We should make this a tradition, Madison suggested. Maybe not a cruise every year, but some kind of trip together. There's so much more of the world to see. I'd like that, I agreed. Your father always wanted us to be travelers, not just tourists. Then it's settled. Madison looped her arm through mine. Next year is my treat. I'm thinking Japan in cherry blossom season, or maybe New Zealand. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I laughed. We still need to go home and see how the house repairs turned out. And you have a potential job transfer to investigate. Madison nodded, her expression turning more serious. About that, I meant what I said about moving closer. The party disaster was terrible, but in a strange way, I'm almost grateful it happened. It forced us to have conversations we'd been avoiding for years. I touched the new pearl necklace at my throat, thinking about the unexpected path that had led us here. What had begun as an impulsive act of retribution had transformed into a journey of reconciliation, not just with each other, but with the past we shared and the futures we would build, together and separately. Life rarely goes according to plan, I reflected. Your father used to say that the detours often lead to the most beautiful views. He was a wise man, Madison said. Yes, I agreed. And he would be very proud of the woman you've become. even with the occasional party disaster. Madison laughed, the sound carrying across the water as Barcelona welcomed us back to solid ground, back to reality, but with a new understanding that would navigate us through whatever lay ahead. 1 year later, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the deck as I arranged a platter of appetizers on the outdoor table. In the distance, Lake Tahoe sparkled like scattered diamonds, the water particularly blue against the backdrop of pine-covered mountains. The restoration of the house had been completed months ago, but I'd continued making improvements, adding new landscaping elements, updating the kitchen with sleeker appliances, and most recently, expanding the deck to accommodate larger gatherings. "Need any help?" Madison called from inside. "Just bringing out the wine," I replied, adjusting the place settings one final time. Tonight was special, a small dinner party to celebrate both Madison's official relocation to Reno and the 1-year anniversary of our Mediterranean cruise. She had followed through on her plan to transfer to her company's Nevada office, and after 6 months of commuting from San Francisco on weekends, she'd finally found a charming condo in Reno, just a 40-minute drive from the lake. The sliding door opened, and Madison emerged carrying a bottle of chilled white wine and a small wrapped package. "Everything looks perfect, Mom," she said, setting the wine in the ice bucket. "Though I still think having me here for a dinner party might give your friends some traumatic flashbacks." I laughed, appreciating that we could now joke about the incident that had once driven such a wedge between us. "They've forgiven you, mostly because the house looks better now than it did before." Madison grinned as she poured 2 glasses of wine. "Silver linings, I guess." The transformation in our relationship over the past year had been remarkable. The cruise had been a turning point, but the real work had happened in the months that followed. Regular phone calls that turned into meaningful conversations, weekend visits that became opportunities for genuine connection, and a new willingness on both sides to address difficult topics directly rather than letting resentment simmer. "Before everyone arrives," Madison said, handing me a glass, "I wanted to give you something." She offered the small wrapped package, suddenly looking nervous. It's not much, but it felt significant. Curious, I unwrapped the gift to find a sleek, leather-bound book with Mediterranean memories embossed on the cover in gold lettering. Opening it, I discovered a beautifully crafted photo album documenting our cruise. Candid shots of us exploring ancient ruins, posing by the Trevi Fountain, sampling local delicacies at sidewalk cafes, and standing together at the ship's railing. With matching wind-blown hair. "Madison," I breathed, turning the pages slowly. "This is wonderful," she beamed, clearly pleased with my reaction. "There's more. Keep going." In the back of the album, I found an envelope. Inside was a printed confirmation for 2 tickets to Kyoto, Japan, dated for the following spring. "Cherry blossom season," Madison explained, watching my expression closely. "Like I promised, next trip is on me." I felt a surge of emotion as I remembered our conversation on the final morning of the cruise. "You really meant it, about making this a tradition." "Of course I did," she said, raising her glass in a small toast. "To many more adventures together." As we clinked glasses, I marveled at the unexpected journey that had brought us to this moment. What had begun as the worst violation of trust had transformed into the foundation for something far stronger and more authentic than the relationship we'd had before. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of our first guests. Madison squeezed my hand before going to answer it. I invited. "Someone special?" she called over her shoulder. "Don't be mad." Before I could question her, she returned with Richard Thornton, our longtime financial advisor. I hadn't seen him in person since before the cruise, though we'd spoken by phone several times regarding updates to the trust arrangements. "Richard, what a surprise!" I greeted him warmly. "Hope you don't mind the ambush," he said, accepting the glass of wine Madison offered. "Your daughter can be very persuasive." "That she can," I agreed, curious about his presence at what I'd expected. To be a casual dinner with neighbors. Madison guided us to the seating area overlooking the lake, her expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. I asked Richard to join us tonight because I have something important to discuss with both of you, she began, her professional demeanor slipping into place. It's about trust. I felt a flicker of concern. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, she assured me quickly. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about the future, and I've made a decision. Richard nodded encouragingly. Madison has some excellent ideas I think you'll want to hear, Linda. Madison took a deep breath. After everything that happened? Last year, the party disaster, the trust fund withdrawal, our cruise, I realized something important about money and responsibility. Dad created that trust to secure my future, but also to teach me about managing resources wisely. I nodded, intrigued by where this might be heading. I'm turning 30 next year, Madison continued. According to the original terms, I'd gain full control of the trust then. But I've discussed it with Richard, and I'd like to modify the arrangement. How? So? I asked. Madison leaned forward, her expression earnest. I want to restructure the trust into a family foundation, one that we manage together. A portion would remain designated for my future needs, and another portion for your retirement security. But the majority would be directed toward causes that would honor Dad's memory. I blinked in surprise. A foundation? Richard intervened, with a professional explanation. What Madison is proposing is essentially a private family foundation that would support causes related to education and medical research, particularly focused on the type of cancer that took Derek's life. It would provide tax advantages while creating a lasting legacy. I know how much Dad valued education, Madison added, and how devastating his illness was for both of us. This would transform his financial gift into something that could help others facing similar challenges. I was momentarily speechless, touched by the thoughtfulness behind her proposal. This is unexpected, Madison smiled. Good unexpected, I hope. Very good, I assured her. But it's a major decision. Are you sure you've thought it through? For months, she confirmed. The foundation would still provide for both our futures, but it would also give purpose to Dad's legacy beyond just securing my financial well-being. And, she added with a meaningful look, it would ensure that we continue working together, making decisions as equals about how to honor his memory. Richard produced a folder containing preliminary paperwork. Nothing needs to be finalized immediately. Take time to review the proposal and discuss it together. As we moved on to lighter topics with the arrival of other guests, I found myself repeatedly glancing at Madison, seeing her through new eyes. The entitled young woman who had once left my home in shambles had evolved into someone thoughtful, forward-thinking, and genuinely concerned with creating meaning beyond material comfort. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Madison and I stood side by side at the railing of the expanded deck, watching moonlight shimmer across the lake. The Japan trip, I said, breaking our comfortable silence. You really didn't have to do that. Madison shrugged. I wanted to. Besides, I've already mapped out our next 5 years of destinations. After Japan, I'm thinking of Peru, then possibly South Africa. I laughed. You sound just like your father with his detailed travel plans. I'll take that as a compliment, she replied, smiling. The highest kind, I assured her. We fell silent again, each lost in our own thoughts. I fingered the Mediterranean pearl necklace I'd worn for the occasion, reflecting on our extraordinary journey. Not just the physical travels, but the emotional distance we'd covered in rebuilding trust and forging a new kind of relationship. No, Madison said finally. When I look back at what happened with the party, as awful as it was at the time, I can't help feeling it was necessary. Necessary? I echoed. She nodded thoughtfully. We were stuck in patterns that weren't serving either of us. I was acting like an entitled child, and you were still treating me like one in many ways. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe to force real change. As the moonlight illuminated her face, I could see both the little girl she had been and the remarkable woman she had become. Someone who could acknowledge her mistakes, learn from them, and use them as catalysts for growth rather than excuses for resentment. Two catastrophes, then, I said with gentle irony, raising my nearly empty glass, and the unexpected blessings they sometimes bring. Madison clinked her glass against mine. And to trust, the kind you earn, not just the kind you inherit. 3 years later, the cherry trees in Kyoto had given way to the lush vineyards of Tuscany, which had then transformed into the sweeping savannas of Tanzania. Now, as I stood on the observation deck of our Antarctic expedition ship, bundled against the cold in layers of high-tech thermal gear, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come, both geographically and emotionally. "Hot chocolate delivery," Madison announced, carefully navigating the slippery deck with 2 steaming mugs. At 32, she had grown into herself completely, confident, thoughtful, with a quiet strength that reminded me more of Derek with each passing year. "Perfect timing," I said gratefully, accepting the warm beverage. "I think I just spotted another pod of orcas off the starboard side." Madison moved to the railing beside me, her breath visible in the frigid air. "This makes 5 continents in 3 years. Not bad for a mother-daughter team who once couldn't share a house for 3 days without disaster." I laughed, the sound carrying across the pristine Antarctic landscape. "We've certainly come a long way from broken furniture and missing jewelry." The journey hadn't always been smooth. There had been disagreements about the foundation structure, occasional flare-ups of old communication patterns, moments when the past threatened to overshadow our progress. But we'd developed new skills for navigating those rough waters, approaching conflicts as problems to solve together rather than battles to be won. The Harrington Family Foundation had officially launched 18 months ago, with a focus on educational scholarships for children who had lost a parent to cancer and funding for innovative research in oncology treatment. The work had given us a shared purpose beyond our annual travels, a legacy that honored Derek while creating something meaningful for the future. "The foundation received another grant application this morning," Madison said, her eyes tracking a distant iceberg. "A promising researcher at Johns Hopkins. Her proposal focuses on early detection methods for the type of cancer Dad had." I nodded, feeling the familiar mix of pain and purpose that accompanied these discussions. "We should review it when we get back. If it looks promising, maybe we can arrange to visit the lab in person." "I'd like that," Madison agreed. Seeing the actual work being done with the foundation funds makes it all feel more real somehow. A comfortable silence fell between us as we sipped our hot chocolate and watched the stark, majestic scenery drift by. Antarctica had been Madison's choice for this year's adventure, a challenging, remote destination that pushed both of us beyond our comfort zones. My initial hesitation had given way to wonder as we'd encountered landscapes unlike anything I'd ever seen. Pristine ice formations, colonies of penguins, the midnight sun casting an ethereal glow over fields of snow. "Mom," Madison said suddenly, her tone more serious, "there's something I need to tell you." I turned to face her, noting the slight crease between her brows that appeared whenever she was anxious about a conversation. "That sounds ominous." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Not ominous, just significant. I've been offered a new position at work, a major promotion." "Madison, that's wonderful," I exclaimed. "Senior Marketing Director?" She shook her head. "VP of Global Marketing Strategy." I blinked in surprise. "That's much bigger than we expected. Congratulations." "Thank you," she said, still looking uncertain. "But there's a catch. The position is based in New York, at the company headquarters." The implications settled over me slowly. For the past 3 years, Madison had been building her life in Reno, just a short drive from the lake house. We'd settled into a comfortable, rhythm of weekly dinners, spontaneous hikes, and collaborative work on the foundation. The prospect of her moving across the country stirred complicated emotions: pride in her success, fear of returning to a more distant relationship, uncertainty about how we would maintain the connection we'd worked so hard to rebuild. "That's a tremendous opportunity," I said carefully. "When would you need to decide?" "They've given me 3 weeks," Madison replied. "The role starts in September, so I'd need to relocate by late August." "And how do you feel about it?" I asked, watching her face. Madison sighed, her breath forming a small cloud in the cold air. "Professionally, it's everything I've been working toward. The compensation is incredible, the scope of responsibility is exactly what I want, and the company is willing to be flexible about my foundation work." "But?" I prompted. "But I've put down roots in Nevada these past few years," she continued. "Not just with you, though that's a big part of it. I've made friends, joined a hiking club, and established routines I enjoy. And the foundation headquarters is there. Moving across the country would change everything." I nodded, understanding her dilemma. "Have you considered asking if you could manage the role remotely, with quarterly trips to New York?" "That was my first question," Madison said. "They're open to some flexibility but made it clear that physical presence at headquarters for at least 3 weeks per month would be essential, at least for the first year." A group of passengers on the other side of the deck suddenly called out excitedly, pointing toward the water where a whale had breached the surface. We watched in silence as the magnificent creature appeared again, water cascading off its massive body before it disappeared beneath the waves. "What would you do?" Madison asked finally. "If you were in my position?" I considered the question carefully, wanting to be thoughtful rather than reactive. "I think the Madison of 4 years ago would have taken the job without hesitation," I began. "Career advancement would have been the priority. Full stop." She nodded, acknowledging the truth in this assessment. "But you're not that person anymore," I continued. "You've discovered that your values are more nuanced now. Professional, success matters to you, but so do relationships, purpose, and quality of life." "That doesn't make the decision any easier," Madison pointed out. "No," I agreed, "but it makes it more meaningful. Instead of just climbing a ladder because it's there, you're considering where you actually want that ladder to lead." Madison turned to look out over the icy landscape again. "What about you? What would you want me to do?" The question touched me deeply, not because she was seeking my approval, but because she genuinely valued my perspective. 4 years ago, such a consideration would never have entered her mind. "I want whatever will bring you fulfillment," I said honestly. "Of course I love having you nearby, but our relationship isn't dependent on geography anymore. We've proven that." Madison smiled. "That's true. We've managed to maintain Richard's involvement in the foundation despite his relocation to Arizona." "Exactly. And communication technology keeps improving. Between video calls, shared documents, and our annual trips, we'd still be very much in each other's lives." "You'd still want to continue our trips?" Madison asked. "Absolutely," I assured her. "Those weeks are sacred to me now. I've already started researching options for next year. I'm thinking Vietnam might be interesting." She nodded, looking relieved. "I was worried you might see my moving as a rejection of everything we've built." "No," I said firmly. "I see it as you continuing to grow into the remarkable person you've become. That growth might take you physically farther away, but emotionally, we've never been closer." Madison impulsively hugged me, nearly spilling her hot chocolate in the process. "When did you get so wise?" she teased. "Around the same time you got so thoughtful," I replied, returning the embrace. We stayed on the observation deck until the cold became unbearable, then retreated inside to the ship's cozy library. As Madison browsed the collection of Antarctic exploration books, I found myself reflecting on our extraordinary journey. Not just this current voyage to the world's most remote continent, but the path we'd traveled together since that fateful weekend when her party had destroyed my home. What had initially seemed like a catastrophe had ultimately been a catalyst for transformation. The trust fund that had once been a source of conflict had evolved into a vehicle for shared purpose through the foundation. The cruise that I'd booked as a defiant act of self-assertion had become the first of many shared adventures that strengthened, rather than divided us. Later that evening, as we joined other passengers for dinner in the ship's dining room, the conversation turned to everyone's reasons for undertaking such an extreme journey to Antarctica. "It's our annual mother-daughter adventure," Madison explained to the curious Canadian couple seated across from us. "We try to choose one remarkable destination each year." "What a wonderful tradition," the wife commented. "How did it start?" Madison and I exchanged a quick glance, our private smile acknowledging the complex truth behind our seemingly wholesome ritual. "Let's just say we had some trust issues to work through," Madison replied diplomatically. Travel turned out to be the perfect therapy. After dinner, we attended a lecture by one of the ship's naturalists about the wildlife we could expect to encounter during tomorrow's zodiac excursion. As fascinating as the information was, I found my attention repeatedly drawn to Madison, who was taking detailed notes with the same focused expression Derek used to have when absorbing new information. Back in our cabin, as we prepared for bed, Madison returned to our earlier conversation about the job offer. "I think I need to at least fly to New York and tour the headquarters before making a decision," she said, hanging up her thermal layers. "Would you consider coming with me? I value your perspective, and it would help to have someone to discuss impressions with afterward." Her invitation, so natural, so collaborative, struck me as the perfect encapsulation of how far we'd come. "I'd be happy to," I told her. "We could make a weekend of it." "Perfect," Madison said, smiling. "And while we're there, we could visit the oncology department at Memorial Sloan Kettering. They have a research team that's been doing work aligned with our foundation's mission." "That's an excellent idea," I agreed, once again impressed by how she integrated various aspects of her life into a cohesive whole. As I drifted toward sleep that night, lulled by the gentle rocking of the ship, I found myself thinking about trust. Not just the financial instrument that had unexpectedly transformed our relationship, but the more fundamental emotional trust we'd rebuilt between us. The word itself held such rich meaning. Trust fund, trust issues, rebuilding trust, trusting the process. The next morning brought crystal clear skies and relatively calm seas, perfect conditions for our zodiac excursion to a nearby island. Bundled in multiple layers with life vests secured over our parkas, we climbed carefully into the small inflatable boat that would transport us from the ship to the shore. The expedition leader, a weathered Australian named Jack who had been navigating Antarctic waters for over 20 years, maneuvered our Zodiac expertly through the icy water. As we approached the island, we could see hundreds of penguins waddling along the rocky shore, their distinctive calls carrying across the still air. "This never gets old," Jack commented as he cut the engine, allowing us to drift quietly near a group of seals lounging on an ice floe. "Been coming down here for 2 decades, and it still feels like the most extraordinary place on Earth." I glanced at Madison, who was photographing the scene with an expression of pure wonder on her face. "I know exactly what you mean," I replied. After disembarking on the island, we followed Jack along a designated path that allowed us to observe the penguin colony without disturbing their natural behaviors. Madison and I lagged slightly behind the main group, both of us captivated by the stark beauty of our surroundings. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," Madison said quietly as we paused to watch a penguin feeding its chick. "About how our relationship isn't dependent on geography anymore." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "You're right," she said. "What we've built these past few years, it's portable. It comes with us wherever we go because it's based on mutual respect and shared values, not just proximity. Exactly, I agreed, touched by her perception. Madison smiled, her breath visible in the frigid air. So, I'm going to take the job in New York. You've decided? She nodded decisively. Last night, I realized that the only reason I was hesitating was fear. Fear that moving away might undermine what we've rebuilt. But that's giving geography too much power and not giving us enough credit. I squeezed her arm through the layers of thermal gear. I think that's wise and very brave. Besides, she added with a grin, New York has one of the best airports in the country for international departures. Makes it that much easier to continue our annual adventures. There is that? I laughed. As we rejoined the group, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The paths that had led us here, from a destroyed lakeside home to the pristine shores of Antarctica, had been unpredictable and sometimes painful. But standing beside my daughter in this remote corner of the world, I wouldn't have changed a single step of our journey. Later, as our Zodiac made its way back to the ship, we passed an enormous iceberg with a perfect archway carved by wind and water. Jack steered us carefully through the natural formation, explaining that such features were rare and temporary, the result of precise conditions that could shift at any moment. Sometimes, he said philosophically, the most beautiful things come from disruption. This arch exists because something broke. Madison caught my eye, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. Our own beautiful, hard-won relationship had emerged from brokenness, trust violated, and then carefully, intentionally, rebuilt into something stronger than before. To disruption, then, Madison said softly, echoing our toast from years earlier. And the unexpected beauty it sometimes creates. As we passed through the ice archway into the open water beyond, I silently thanked the sequence of events that had led us here. The party that destroyed my home, the trust fund withdrawal that funded our first trip, and every step of the remarkable journey that had transformed us both in ways neither of us could have imagined. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.